There's a language in wood that most people never hear. It speaks of its life, of the seasons it has weathered, the winds it has fought. Right now, this piece of white pine under my hands is telling me a story of a long, peaceful life. The grain is straight and true, without knots or complications. It's the perfect wood for a cradle. My workshop is the only place left in the world that feels entirely mine. It smells of sawdust, linseed oil, and the faint, sweet aroma of the bourbon I keep on the shelf for cold nights. The air is thick with the ghosts of 1,000 projects, of a life spent making things that last. Outside, the Hudson Valley is settling into the deep freeze of late December. Snow is clinging to the branches of the old oaks, and the world is painted in shades of white and gray. It's quiet, the kind of profound quiet that settles in your bones. The cradle is almost finished. I run my calloused palm over the smooth, sanded curve of the rocker. A perfect arc. I'd use the same design, the same joinery, that I used for my son Leo's cradle 35 years ago. Some of the wood even came from the same ancient pine that stood on this property when my wife, Elena, and I first bought it. A piece of the past, ready to hold the future. My future grandson, or granddaughter. Leo and his fiancée, Tiffany, were planning to announce the pregnancy along with their engagement at the family Christmas dinner. It's all I've wanted, really, to see my son happy, to see the Callahan line continue, to have a small hand to hold, to teach how to hold a chisel, how to feel the story in the wood. But a splinter of unease has worked its way under my skin lately, and I can't seem to dig it out. It started a few months ago. Leo, my Leo, who grew up with dirt under his fingernails and the scent of this workshop in his clothes, started using words that didn't belong to him. Words like monetization, brand identity, and leveraging assets. He's the COO of my company, Callahan and Son Custom Woodworking, a title I gave him to make him feel important. But lately, he talks about it like it's some faceless corporation on Wall Street, not a place where I know every floorboard that creaks and every tool by the unique were on its handle. Then there's Tiffany. She's sharp, polished, and smells of expensive perfume that always seems to be at war with the honest end of the shop. She works in finance in Manhattan, a world of glass towers and abstract numbers, as far from this place as you can get. When she looks at the furniture I've spent my life creating, her eyes don't see the hand-cut dovetails or the hours of patient labor. They see a price tag. She looks at this workshop, my home, not as a place where a family was raised and a life was built, but as a charming piece of real estate with significant development potential. She said that once, smiling, as if she were paying me a compliment. I try to like her, for Leo's sake. I really did. Elena, God rest her soul, always said you have to find the good wood in people, even if you have to plane away a few rough layers. But with Tiffany, the more I plane, the more I feel like I'm hitting particle board. The last time they visited, I noticed the watch on Leo's wrist. A gleaming, ostentatious Swiss thing that costs more than the new bandsaw I'd been saving for. I know what I pay him. It's a good salary, more than fair, but it's not a watch like that salary. When I asked about it, he just shrugged. An investment, Dad. You have to look the part. Look the part of what? I wanted to ask. The son of a simple carpenter? I put down my sanding block and stepped back, admiring the cradle. It's a good piece. Strong. Honest. It will last for generations. I hope. A wave of melancholy washes over me, as it often does this time of year. This will be the 8th Christmas without Elena. The house feels bigger, emptier every year. The silence is louder. Having the whole family here, my brothers, their kids, all the cousins, it's a welcome noise. A necessary distraction. This year, with the big announcement, it's supposed to be special. A new branch on the family tree. So why do I feel like I'm watching a storm gather on a perfectly clear day? I clean my tools, arranging them neatly on the pegboard wall. Each one has its place. Order. Control. It's how I make sense of the world. Measure twice, cut once. A rule for carpentry, and a damn good rule for life. I just have this nagging feeling that someone in my life has been making cuts without measuring at all. I switch off the main lights, leaving only a single bulb burning over my workbench. It casts a warm glow on the cradle, making it look like a holy thing in the encroaching darkness. I pour a finger of bourbon into a small glass, the amber liquid catching the light. I raise it in a silent toast to the cradle, to the future, to Elena. And I try to ignore the cold dread that tastes like bitter ash on the back of my tongue. I tell myself it's just an old man's foolishness, just the loneliness of a long winter. I was wrong. It wasn't foolishness. It was the calm, quiet instinct of a man who had spent a lifetime spotting the flaws in the grain before the wood decided to split. And the whole damn structure of my life was about to splinter into a million pieces. 5 days before Christmas, I finished the bourbon and washed the glass in the deep utility sink, the cold water stinging my knuckles. The routine of closing up was a comfort, a series of small, predictable actions that held the chaos of the world at bay. I checked the thermostat, made sure the embers in the wood stove were safely dying, and walked to the big rolling door to throw the last deadbolt. My hand was on the cold steel when I heard it. The sound was alien here. Not the familiar rumble of my old Ford pickup, but the quiet, arrogant purr of a German engine. Headlights cut a sharp, white gash across the frosted windows of the workshop. Leo's BMW. They weren't supposed to be here. A jolt of irritation quickly suppressed. Maybe they'd forgotten something. Maybe they wanted to see the cradle. I was in the small back office, a cluttered space with a desk buried under invoices and sketches, about to grab my jacket. I heard the side door open, the one they had a key to. I heard their footsteps, sharp and quick on the concrete floor, so different from my own heavy tread. And then I heard their voices, low and conspiratorial, assuming they were alone. I froze, not out of any conscious decision to eavesdrop, but from a primal instinct. The way a deer freezes in the forest when it senses the predator it cannot yet see. Just make sure you have the papers in the right folder, Leo. Tiffany's voice was a low hiss, sharp as a shard of glass. I don't want any fumbling. It has to look smooth and natural. I know, Tiff. Doing on Christmas Day, in front of everyone, it feels. Leo's voice trailed off. Weak. I could picture him perfectly, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair, a troubled look on his face that was more about the risk of getting caught than any moral objection. It's the only way, she snapped back, her voice devoid of any warmth. It has to be public. Emotional. His brothers, his nieces, they'll all be there, cooing over the engagement, the baby. He won't dare make a scene. It's psychological leverage. He'll be cornered. My blood ran cold. Papers? A scene? What in God's name were they talking about? I heard Leo sigh. And you're sure about the facility in Greenwich? It's the best money can buy. Tiffany cut him off. He'll be comfortable. Think of it as a permanent vacation. Great view of the sound. It's a luxury assisted living community, Leo, not a prison. He'll have activities. The word facility hung in the air, a sterile final word. My mind was scrambling, trying to piece it together, trying to find a version of this conversation that wasn't monstrous. My son wouldn't, he couldn't. And then Leo spoke the words that took the world I knew, the life I had built, and turned it to dust and ashes. The words that ended him as my son and turned him into something else entirely. Something I had to deal with. Tiffany must have sensed his hesitation because she asked, "You think he'll resist?" There was a pause. I held my breath, praying in that split second for my son to find a spine, to find an ounce of the loyalty and love I had poured into him for 35 years. "No," Leo said, his voice now confident, dismissive. It was the casual cruelty of it that struck me like a physical blow. He's old and sentimental. He'll sign anything to keep the peace. 11 words. That was the price of my life, the cost of my love, the value of my trust. I stood there in the darkness of my small office, my hands still clutching the back of my worn leather chair. The scent of pine and oil was gone, replaced by the metallic taste of betrayal in my mouth. I felt nothing. It was a terrifying sensation. The heartbreak was so immense, so absolute, that it bypassed pain and went straight to a glacial calm. The father in me, the man who had built that cradle with loving hands, died in that moment. I heard them rummaging near my main workbench. "Okay, the company ledgers are here," Leo said. "And the property deeds are in the safe in the house. Once we have his signature on the power of attorney, it's a clean sweep. We file the paperwork on the 26th. The buyers for the business are already lined up, and the realtor says we can list the house and property by New Year's. A clean sweep. They were going to erase me. My business. My home. My life. They were going to sell off every board, every tool, every memory, and ship me off to die quietly in a room with a nice view, all for the money. And they were going to use Christmas Day, my family, and my love for them as the weapon to do it. I stayed perfectly still, regulating my breathing the way I used to when I was a young man facing down union thugs who wanted to burn down my fur shop. You don't get angry. Anger is a fire that consumes you. You get cold. You get clear. You become the ice, the stone. You endure, and then you act. I listened to their footsteps retreat. The side door clicked shut. The purr of the BMW's engine started, faded down the long driveway, and then was gone. Silence returned. But it was a different kind of silence now. It wasn't peaceful. It was hollow, empty. Slowly, deliberately, I walked out of the office and into the main workshop. The single bulb still cast its glow on the cradle, a monument to my own foolishness, a testament to a future that would never happen. I looked at the smooth wood, the perfect joints, the gentle curve of the rockers. A lifetime of skill poured into a vessel for a lie. I didn't smash it. I didn't kick it. I walked over to a pile of canvas drop cloths, pulled one off the top, and gently, reverently, draped it over the cradle, covering it completely, like covering a body. The man who built that cradle was gone. In his place stood someone else, a stranger to myself, forged in the ice of 11 words. And he had work to do. I walked from the workshop to the house, my boots crunching on the frozen gravel. Each step felt heavy, deliberate. The world looked the same. The skeletal branches of the maple tree against the bruised purple sky, the wisp of smoke from a neighbor's chimney. But it was a photograph of a place I no longer lived in. The man who had walked this path an hour ago believed in things, in family, in legacy, in the inherent goodness of his own son. That man was a fool, and I have never suffered fools, least of all myself. Inside, the house was warm. Elena's presence was everywhere, in the faded floral pattern of the armchair, in the arrangement of books on the shelf, in the scent of cinnamon that always lingered in the kitchen, no matter how long she'd been gone. Tonight, these comforts felt like accusations, reminders of a life built on a foundation of sand. I didn't turn on the lights. I walked through the familiar darkness to the liquor cabinet, my hand finding the bottle of 25-year-old Macallan I'd been saving. I bought it the day Leo graduated from college. I planned to open it when he got married, or when his first child was born. A toast to the future. The irony was so bitter it almost made me laugh. I poured a generous measure into a heavy crystal tumbler, one of set Elena's father had given us for our wedding. The first sip was like swallowing fire and velvet. It burned a clean path down my throat, clearing away the shock, leaving behind a cold, hard clarity. I sat down in my worn leather chair, facing the unlit fireplace. The initial shock had passed. The grief was a deep, cold ocean inside me, but I wouldn't let myself drown. Not yet. I'd been a builder my entire life. I took raw materials, wood, steel, stone, and I gave them form and purpose. I built structures designed to withstand time, weather, and pressure. And now, I would build a trap. It wouldn't be a messy, emotional act of revenge. Revenge is a sucker's game, a wild swing in the dark. This would be a lesson, a demolition, a careful, methodical dismantling of their entire world, executed with the precision of a master craftsman. They thought I was a sentimental old man. They thought I was a relic. They were about to learn that the oldest trees have the deepest roots, and the quietest men have the sharpest minds. They had made a critical error. They mistook my kindness for weakness. They mistook my silence for ignorance. They had looked at my calloused hands and seen a simple laborer, not the man who had built a multi-million-dollar business from nothing, stared down loan sharks in the early days, outmaneuvered corporate vultures who tried to swallow me whole in the 90s, and negotiated contracts that would make a Wall Street lawyer's head spin. I just never brought that man home. That was a failure on my part. I'd wanted to shield my son from the ugliness of the world I'd navigated. In doing so, I'd raised a son who couldn't see the wolf standing right in front of him. I finished my drink, the warmth spreading through my chest, fueling the cold fire in my mind. I stood up and walked to the small study where Elena used to pay the bills. In the bottom drawer of the old steel filing cabinet, beneath a stack of expired passports and old tax returns, was a small, black leather address book. I hadn't opened it in almost a decade. The names in it were not friends. They were assets, men and women I had helped, or who had helped me, people who understood the concept of a debt. My finger traced down the faded ink. I found the first number. I picked up the phone, the old landline, and dialed. It rang 4 times before a groggy, irritated voice answered. "Rosen, David," I said, my voice calm and even. "It's Art Callahan." There was a pause, then the sound of movement of a man sitting up straighter. The sleepiness vanished from his voice, replaced by sharp attention. "Art, it's 3 in the morning. Is everything all right?" David Rosen was the sharpest, most ruthless corporate lawyer in New York City. He owed me. I'd built the custom cabinetry for his entire Fifth Avenue penthouse 20 years ago when he was just starting out, and when his financing fell through, I told him to pay me when he could. He never forgot. "No, David, nothing's all right," I said. "I need you to open my corporate and personal files. I am restructuring everything, and I need it done by Christmas Eve." "Art, that's impossible. The filings, the board." "There is no board, David. It's just me and my son." I let the words hang in the air. "It's about my son. I need you to be my surgeon. I need you to cut him out. Cleanly, legally, and permanently." The line went silent for a moment. David was smart enough not to ask questions. He just processed the tone. "I'll be at my office in an hour. Send me a preliminary email." "What do you need first?" "Everything," I said. "Start with a full review of Callahan and Son's financials for the past 3 years. I want to know where every single penny has gone. Every expense account, every consultant fee." "Consider done," he said. "Who's my counterpart?" I flipped a page in the black book. "Frank Kozlowski. He's a forensic accountant. He'll be in touch." Next call, Maria Flores, a former NYPD detective turned private investigator. Her son had gotten into some serious trouble a few years back. I'd given him a job in my shop, a second chance. He was one of my best foremen now. Maria had told me then, "Anything you ever need, Art." "Anything." She answered on the second ring, her voice alert and professional, even in the middle of the night. "Flores. Maria, it's Art Callahan. I need your services. It's urgent and it's discreet." "Name it." "A woman. Tiffany Morgan. Fiancée to my son, Leo Callahan. She works in finance, lives in the city. I want to know everything. Where she came from, who her family is, her real financial situation, her employment history, any skeletons, any whispers. I want to know who I'm dealing with. I need it yesterday." "You'll have it in 48 hours, she said, no hesitation. "I'll start with the public records and financial footprints. It's amazing what people leave behind." "Thank you, Maria." I hung up and sat back in the chair, the old leather creaking. The pieces were in motion. The surgeon, the auditor, the investigator. I felt a grim satisfaction. I was back in a world I understood. A world of strategy and consequences. My son and his fiancée were planning a little Christmas surprise. They had no idea I was planning one of my own. Theirs was a sloppy, sentimental ambush. Mine would be a masterpiece of demolition. They were coming to a gunfight with a strongly worded letter. I looked at the phone in my hand. One more call to make. I dialed Frank Kozlowski, a man who could find a single fraudulent penny in the Vatican's budget. The game was on, and I was going to write the rules. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in deception. I became the man they expected me to be, the slightly dotty, slow-moving father, lost in his memories and excited for Christmas. I played the part so well, I sometimes scare myself. It's a dangerous thing to discover you have a talent for the cold-blooded lie. On Tuesday morning, I called Leo. I made my voice sound warm, a little frail. "Leo, son, just want to talk about the menu for Christmas dinner. Your Aunt Clara is handling the turkey, but I was thinking of making Elena's apple pie. I know how much you always loved it. There was a slight pause on the other end of the line, the sound of him recalibrating from predator to dutiful son. "Oh, yeah, Dad, that sounds great. Fantastic." His voice was slick with false sincerity. "Tiff and I were just talking about how much we're looking forward to it. It's going to be a really special day." "It certainly will be," I said, the words tasting like acid. "Listen, about Tiffany's gift. I'm at a bit of a loss. What do you think a lovely young woman like her would appreciate?" He jumped at the bait. It was almost pathetic how easy it was. "Well, Dad, she has very classic tastes. Maybe something from Tiffany's, the real one," he added with a chuckle, as if I wouldn't know the difference. "A simple bracelet, maybe? Something elegant." "An excellent idea, son," I said. "Elegant. I'll take care of it." He was telling me to spend thousands of dollars on his fiancée, money he believed would soon be his anyway. He was looting the house before the owner was even dead. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. While I performed this charade of domesticity, my real work was happening in the shadows. My house, the place they saw as a future asset to be liquidated, became my war room. David, Maria, and Frank became a disembodied team of ghosts, communicating through encrypted emails and burner phones I'd bought for cash at a bodega downtown. David Rosen, true to his word, had his junior associates digging through years of corporate filings. He confirmed what I already knew. As the sole proprietor of a privately held company, I had absolute authority. Leo was an employee, nothing more. His title of COO was a gift, of vanity, with no legal power attached unless I granted it. A gift I was about to revoke. Frank Kozlowski, the accountant, was the artist. He dove into the company's books and saw not numbers, but a story. He followed the trail of inflated invoices, of consulting fees paid to shell corporations, of marketing expenses for campaigns that never existed. It was a slow, methodical bleed. Leo wasn't just planning to take the company. He'd been stealing from it, from me, for years. I spent those days in my workshop, the draped cradle standing like a tomb in the corner. I didn't work. I sat at my bench, sharpening chisels, oiling planes, cleaning my tools. The repetitive, familiar motions calmed the storm inside me. It was a way of preparing for the coming cut. As I drew a whetstone along the edge of a blade, honing it to a razor sharpness, I thought about the lesson I was about to teach. You don't smash a beautiful piece of wood because it has a flaw. You expose the flaw. You cut it out with surgical precision. You show it for what it is. In the evenings, I'd sit in my leather chair, a legal pad on my knee, mapping out Christmas Day. Not the menu, but the sequence of events. The timing of email. The exact wording. I was building its structure, ensuring there were no weak joints, no points of failure. It had to be airtight. Final. I thought back to a time, years ago, when a big developer from the city tried to force me out of this land. He wanted to build a subdivision of cookie-cutter McMansions. He threatened me, sent lawyers, tried to get the town to rezone me into oblivion. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten back. I just did my research. I found the wetlands he'd failed to declare on his environmental impact report. I found the endangered species of salamander living in the creek that ran through the back of my property. I made a few quiet phone calls to the EPA and the State Department of Environmental Conservation. His project died, buried under a mountain of fines and injunctions. He never saw it coming. He, too, had looked at my flannel shirt and sawdust-covered boots and seen a simpleton. People like that, people like Tiffany and my son, they only see the surface. They never think to check the foundation. And their own foundations were rotten to the core. On Wednesday evening, Leo called again. "Hey, Dad, just checking in. You doing okay? You sound a little tired." The feigned concern was almost more insulting than the betrayal itself. "Just old, son," I said, letting a weary sigh into the phone. "Getting the house ready for everyone is a lot of work these days." "Well, don't you worry about a thing," he said, his voice oozing charm. "Soon, you'll be able to just relax. Put your feet up. You've earned it." I felt a cold smile touch my lips, a grim, humorless thing. "You have no idea, Leo," I said softly. "You have no idea." Thursday morning, the first reports came in. It felt like watching a demolition expert's survey, pinpointing the structural weaknesses in a building, just before pressing the plunger. The information arrived not in a flood, but in a series of precise, devastating strikes delivered to my encrypted email account. The first was from Frank Kozlowski. It was a PDF file, lean and brutal, stripped of all accounting jargon. It was a summary of his initial findings, and it was worse than I could have imagined. Leo hadn't just been siphoning money. He'd been building an entirely separate financial life on the back of my company. The total came to $317,450. Over 18 months. Frank had broken it down. Consulting fees paid to an LLC that, after a little digging, turned out to be registered to Tiffany's maiden name. Marketing and travel expenses that corresponded perfectly with trips they'd taken to Aruba, Aspen, and Napa Valley. Trips I'd seen plastered all over Tiffany's Instagram, naively believing Leo was simply doing well for himself. There were charges for $5,000 dinners in Manhattan, monthly payments on a luxury car I didn't know he had, and a steady stream of cash withdrawals from a corporate account I'd entrusted him with for operational emergencies. He hadn't just been stealing from me. He'd been systematically gutting my legacy to fund a life he hadn't earned. Each transaction was a small act of contempt. Each falsified invoice was a quiet laugh at the old man in the workshop. The betrayal was deeper, more calculated, and had been going on for far longer than I thought. He hadn't just decided to put me in a home. He'd been paving the road to it with my own money. I printed the report, the single sheet of paper feeling impossibly heavy in my hand. I read it once, then twice, letting the cold, hard numbers burn themselves into my memory. This wasn't a son making a mistake. This was a predator. An hour later, Maria's email arrived. The subject line was simple, T. Morgan. Her report was a masterpiece of forensic investigation. Tiffany wasn't from old money in Greenwich, as she'd led Leo and everyone else to believe. She grew up in a working-class suburb of Stamford. Her parents were drowning in debt, having remortgaged their small house twice to fund Tiffany's obsession with appearances, the right schools, the right clothes, the right social circles. The real bombshell was her employment history. She hadn't left her previous job at a prestigious investment firm to explore other opportunities, as she claimed. She had been quietly forced to resign. Maria had found a source, a disgruntled former colleague, who confirmed that Tiffany had been caught churning client accounts, making excessive trades to generate commissions. The firm, terrified of a scandal, had swept it under the rug, allowing her to leave with a sealed severance agreement in exchange for her silence. She was a financial parasite, and she'd been looking for a new host. And she found one. A weak, insecure man with a rich father and a trusting nature. Leo wasn't her partner. He was her mark. Her ticket out of the debt and desperation of her own life. She wasn't just influencing him. She was a puppeteer, and Leo was dancing on her strings. The plan to sell my business and put me away, it had her fingerprints all over it. The calculated cruelty, the legal maneuvering, the sheer, naked greed. It was her signature. Leo was just the tool she was using to get the job done. I looked from Frank's report to Maria's, spread out on my workbench. The picture was now complete. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was a conspiracy. A hostile takeover of my life, orchestrated by a sociopath and executed by my own son. The pain I expected to feel didn't come. Instead, there was a strange sense of liberation. The last vestiges of doubt, the faint, flickering hope that I had misunderstood something, that there was some explanation, it was all extinguished. They had made it simple. They had revealed themselves to be nothing more than a problem that needed to be solved. The phone rang, shattering the silence. It was my sister, Clara. Art, just wanted to confirm you're bringing the pies on Saturday. Everyone's so excited to see you, and to finally meet this Tiffany we've heard so much about. Leo says she's just a gem. I took a deep breath, pushing my voice back into the persona I had created. The kindly, slightly befuddled old carpenter. Of course, Clara. Wouldn't miss it for the world. The pies will be there. And yes, Tiffany is very memorable. Wonderful. See you around 2 o'clock. Don't be late. I hung up the phone. 2 o'clock on Christmas Day. Their D-Day. The moment they planned to spring their trap in a room full of unsuspecting family members. They thought they were the hunters. They had no idea they were walking into a kill box I'd been building just for them. I took the 2 reports and filed them away in a new folder, labeled simply, The Lesson. It was time to draft the final blueprints. It was time to build the deadfall. Christmas Eve, the world outside my window was a postcard of Courier and Ives' perfection. A fresh blanket of snow had fallen overnight, muffling all sound, making the world seem clean and new. A profound, almost holy, silence had settled over the valley. It was the kind of day that made you believe in peace on earth and goodwill toward men. Inside my house, I was preparing for war. The morning was spent in the kitchen, not out of nostalgia, but as part of the performance. The house had to look right, smell right. I put on an old flannel shirt, dusted with flour. I peeled a bushel of apples, the familiar motion of the paring knife, a steadying rhythm. I rolled out the dough Elena had taught me how to make, its texture as familiar to my hands as the grain of oak. Soon, the house was filled with a warm, comforting aroma of cinnamon, nutmeg, and baking apples. It was the scent of home, of family, of love. It was the perfect camouflage. Anyone looking in would have seen a lonely widower, finding solace in old traditions, preparing a peace offering for the family gathering. They would never have guessed that the scent was a smokescreen, masking the cold, metallic odor of a meticulously planned demolition. At noon, a black town car with tinted windows pulled into my driveway, its tires crunching softly in the new snow. David Rosen got out, carrying a slim leather briefcase. He wasn't dressed in his usual $1,000 suit, but in a discreet dark sweater and slacks, looking more like a visiting nephew than a legal assassin. We didn't speak in a house. I led him to the workshop. It was the one place I knew was secure, the one place I could be certain there were no listening ears or hidden devices. I uncovered the cradle, and we used its smooth, flat top as our desk. There was a grim poetry in that which was not lost on me. The object I had built to welcome a new life would now serve as the table upon which I signed the documents to end an old one. David laid out the papers, a neat stack of cream-colored stationery that represented the culmination of 72 hours of relentless, high-priced legal warfare. He walked me through them, his voice low and precise. First was the new last will and testament. It was simple, elegant, and brutal. He had helped me establish the Elena Callahan Artisans Trust, a charitable foundation dedicated to providing scholarships and grants to young, aspiring woodworkers and craftsmen. It would be funded by the entirety of my estate, the business, the property, my personal savings, everything. My brothers and their families were each left a token, sentimental amount to show they were not forgotten. And then there was the clause for Leo. It was a single, stark sentence. For reasons known to him, I intentionally make no provision in this will for my son, Leo Callahan, nor for his issue. I picked up the heavy fountain pen. The nib scratched against the paper, the only sound in the cold workshop. I signed my name, Arthur Callahan. It felt like setting the final stone in a foundation. Next came the corporate documents. A resolution, signed by me as the sole director, terminating Leo's employment with Callahan & Son, effective immediately for cause, citing gross financial misconduct and embezzlement. Attached to it was a summary of Frank's audit, a damning and irrefutable litany of his theft. I signed. Then, a letter addressed to the bank that held the mortgage on the luxury apartment in Soho that Leo and Tiffany called home. I had co-signed the loan, a fact that had slipped my mind until David reminded me. My guarantee was the only reason they qualified. The letter was a formal notification that, due to a material breach of familial and financial trust, I was immediately revoking my guarantee. David explained the legal effect. The bank's risk profile on the loan would skyrocket, triggering covenants that would allow them to call the entire loan due. They would have to pay the full remaining balance, over $1 million, or face immediate foreclosure. I signed again. My signature was getting steadier, more confident with each document. Finally, David slid a single sheet of paper across the cradle's surface. It was a draft of an email. The subject line read, "Your Christmas gift." He had composed it with the cold, dispassionate precision of a surgeon. It contained no emotion, no anger, no accusations. It simply stated the facts and listed the attached documents. I took the liberty of adding one last touch, David said, pointing to the CC line. I've compiled a list of the key board members and the head of HR at Tiffany's current firm, and the senior partners at the firm she was forced out of, and her parents. When you send this to Leo and Tiffany, it will go to all of them simultaneously. The background check for Maria Flores will be of particular interest to her employers, especially the parts about sealed severance agreements and churning client accounts. The SEC takes a very dim view of that sort of thing. He was better at this than I was. He wasn't just disarming them. He was salting the earth so nothing would ever grow again. I nodded slowly. Thank you, David. He packed the executed documents back into his briefcase. The originals are now on file with my office. Copies will be couriered to all relevant parties first thing on the 26th. It's done, Art. It's airtight. He paused, looking at me, his professional mask slipping for a moment. Are you going to be okay? I looked around the workshop, at the tools hanging in their perfect order on the walls, at the scent of wood and history at the shrouded cradle. I will be, I said, and I knew it was true. Some structures have to be torn down before you can build something new. He nodded, understanding. He left as quietly as he had arrived. That evening, as the sun set, painting the snow outside in shades of orange and pink, the phone rang. It was Leo. His voice was brimming with a smug, feigned excitement. Dad, just wanted to wish you a Merry Christmas Eve. We're so excited for tomorrow. Got all the papers ready to go. The question was casual, but I could hear the greed humming beneath it. I leaned back in my chair, the apple pie cooling on the counter, the smell of a happy home thick in the air. I let a small, genuine smile touch my lips. It felt good. Everything is ready, son, I said, my voice perfectly calm. I have a few documents of my own. I think you'll find them very comprehensive. Can't wait for you to see them. Great, great, he said, completely missing the ice in my tone. We'll see you at Claire's around 2. This is going to be the best Christmas ever. I'm sure it will be a Christmas you'll never forget, I replied. After I hung up, I walked over to my laptop. I opened my email, attached the files David had prepared, and pasted in the text. I filled in the to line with Leo's and Tiffany's email addresses. Then, I painstakingly copied the long list of recipients into the BCC line. The board members, the lawyers, her parents, his entire world, and hers. I saved it as a draft. All I had to do now was wait for the phone to ring. All I had to do was wait for him to ask the question. And then I would press send. Christmas Day arrived, cold and brilliant. The sun shone with a fierce, wintry glare, making the fresh snow glitter as if it were scattered with diamonds. It was a beautiful day, a day for family, for celebration, for new beginnings. My house was silent. The 2 apple pies sat on the kitchen counter, perfectly browned, cooling in their tins. The aroma had faded overnight, leaving only a ghost of cinnamon in the air. A single suitcase stood by the front door, packed with the few things I cared to keep. My old Ford pickup was gassed up and ready in the driveway, its cab holding a small wooden box of my most essential tools. I did not go to my sister Claire's house. I did not get dressed in my holiday best. I sat in my leather armchair, wearing a simple pair of jeans and a gray wool sweater. I drank black coffee from a thick ceramic mug, and I waited. The landline on the end table next to me was an old rotary phone, a relic. I kept it because I liked the solid, mechanical feel of it, the satisfying whir and click as the dial turned. Today, its silence felt absolute, a coiled snake biding its time. My family would be gathering now. My brothers, their wives, my nieces and nephews with their own young children. The house would be filled with the happy chaos of a holiday, shouts and laughter, the crinkle of wrapping paper, the smell of roasting turkey. They would be asking, where's Art? Where are Leo and Tiffany? At first, there would be no concern. I was often a few minutes late, a habit born of a lifetime of finishing one last task in the workshop. Leo and Tiffany, traveling from the city, could easily be delayed by traffic. But as 1 o'clock became 1:30 and 1:30 stretched past 2, the questions would become tinged with impatience, then with worry. Clara would try my cell phone, which lay switched off on the kitchen counter. Then she would try the landline. At precisely 2:05 p.m., the black rotary phone shrilled to life, its loud, metallic ring cutting through the silence of the house like a surgeon's scalpel. I let it ring a second time, then a third. I wanted him to feel the anxiety, the first prickle of fear that his perfect plan was starting to unravel. On the fourth ring, I picked up the heavy Bakelite receiver. "Hello," I said, my voice perfectly neutral. "Dad, where the hell are you?" Leo's voice was a tight coil of frustration and anger. The mask of the loving son had dropped. This was his true voice. Impatient, demanding. "Everyone is here. We're all waiting for you. Claire's about to have a fit. We can't do the announcement until you get here. Did you forget the papers?" I took a slow sip of my coffee. The liquid was hot, bitter, and grounding. I looked out the window at the brilliant, indifferent snow. I could picture him perfectly, standing in the entryway of Clara's house, Tiffany at his elbow, her face a mask of perfectly manicured impatience. The whole family would be watching, their happy holiday mood curdling into confusion. This was the moment, the pivot point, the instant where the world he thought he controlled was about to fly apart in his hands. "I'm not coming, Leo," I said. The silence on the other end of the line was thick with disbelief and rage. "What do you mean, you're not coming?" "Dad, don't be ridiculous. This is the plan. Get in your truck and get over here. Now." I allowed myself a small, cold laugh. It wasn't a sound of humor. It was the sound of a lock clicking into place, of a steel door slamming shut. "The plan," I repeated softly. "Yes, I know all about the plan. Yours, at least." "What are you talking about?" he blustered, but for the first time, I heard a tremor of uncertainty in his voice. "Just get over here." I set my coffee mug down on the end table with a quiet click. I reached over to my laptop, which sat open on the table beside me. My finger hovered over the trackpad, the cursor a white arrow poised over the send button of the email I had drafted the night before. "I don't think so," I said, my voice as calm and cold as the winter air. "Check your email, Leo. Check Tiffany's, too. I believe you'll find it illuminating. My gift to you both. Merry Christmas, son." Before he could respond, before he could even process the words, I placed the heavy receiver back into its cradle, cutting the connection. The sudden silence in the room was deafening. My hand was steady. I moved the cursor, and I clicked send. The email left my outbox with an almost imperceptible digital whisper. For a moment, nothing happened. The world remained still. The sun still cast long, blue shadows across the snow. Then, my mind conjured the scene I had so carefully constructed. I wasn't there to see it, but I could play it out in my head with the clarity of a film. In the warm, crowded entryway of my sister's house, amidst the scent of pine needles and roasting turkey, Leo would be staring at his phone, his face a canvas of confusion turning to raw panic. Tiffany, sensing the shift, would peer over his shoulder, her own perfectly made-up face contorting as she read the subject line. "Your Christmas gift." They would open it. Of course they would. And their world would end. Not with a bang, but with the cold, sterile text of a legal document. I imagined Leo's eyes scanning the text I had written, the words I had chosen with such deliberate, surgical care. To Leo Callahan, Tiffany Morgan, BCC. A list of 27 names. Board members, HR directors, senior partners, parents. Subject, your Christmas gift. Leo, Tiffany. Attached for your review are several documents which formalize a restructuring of my personal and professional affairs. I believe they are self-explanatory. As of today, December 25th, the following actions have been executed. 1. Termination of employment. Leo Callahan's position with Callahan & Son Custom Woodworking has been terminated for cause, effective immediately. See attached summary of forensic audit, attachment A. A full report will be forwarded to the district attorney's office. 2. Revocation of financial guarantees. All personal financial guarantees extended to Leo Callahan and or Tiffany Morgan have been revoked. Your lending institution has been notified, attachment B. I believe you'll find this materially alters the terms of your mortgage. 3. Last will and testament. My estate has been fully restructured. The sole beneficiary is a charitable trust established in my late wife's name. You will find you are no longer a party to my estate. Attachment C. 4. Background information. For the benefit of all interested parties, I have also included a third-party due diligence report regarding Tiffany Morgan. Attachment D. I trust her employers and family will find it enlightening. All accounts should be settled. This is my final lesson to you both. Do not attempt to contact me. Arthur Callahan. I pictured the blood draining from Leo's face as he clicked on the first attachment. The neat columns of figures from Frank's audit, a clinical account of his years of theft. His eyes would dart to Tiffany, a silent, desperate plea, but she would be lost in her own private hell, scrolling frantically through Maria's report on her phone. Her carefully constructed facade, the old money, the prestigious career, the flawless reputation, was being incinerated in real time, broadcast to every person whose opinion mattered to her. The board members of her company, the partners at the firm that had quietly fired her, her own parents, who would now see the true, staggering depth of her lies. A scream. In my vision, it was Tiffany who screamed first. A raw, ragged sound of pure animal fury and despair. It would tear through the festive atmosphere of the house, silencing the chatter, turning every head. The family would stare bewildered. My brother John would take a step forward. Lau, what's wrong? What is it? But Leo wouldn't be able to answer. He'd be frozen, staring at the screen, watching the digital architecture of his life collapse into ruin. The job was gone. The money was gone. The inheritance was gone. The apartment was gone. He had traded his father, his family, his soul for a lifestyle built on lies, and the bill had just come due on Christmas Day. Then the phones would start. A symphony of destruction. The first call to Tiffany's phone would be from her CEO, his voice no doubt like a chip of ice. The first call to her parents' phone would be from the bank about the second mortgage they'd taken out for her. Leo's phone would ring with calls from bewildered family members standing right next to him. What's going on? What email? They would be trapped, standing in a room full of the very people they had intended to use as their audience, their props. But the play had been rewritten. The heroes were now the villains, and their public humiliation, the one they had planned for me, was now their own, magnified 1,000 times over. The happy family gathering would devolve into a nightmare of recriminations and confusion. The carefully wrapped presents under the tree would seem like a sick joke. The engagement announcement, the baby news, all of it would turn to ash in their mouths. I sat there in my quiet house, the architect of their ruin. I did not feel joy. I did not feel triumph. I felt a profound, aching emptiness. The clean, satisfying feeling of a job well done, but a job I should never have had to do. I had cut out the rot, but the rot was my own son, and that was a wound that would never fully heal. The house was no longer my home. It was just a building full of ghosts and memories, the last of which was the echo of my son's greed and my own cold response. It was time to leave them behind. I stood up, walked to the kitchen counter, and turned off my cell phone for the last time. I left the 2 apple pies sitting there, a bitter offering for a feast that would never happen. Then I walked out the front door, leaving the key in a lock. I didn't look back. I climbed into the cab of my old Ford F-150. The leather on the bench seat was cracked and worn, molded to the shape of my body over thousands of miles and 30 years of work. The engine turned over with a familiar, gravelly roar, an honest, mechanical sound in a world that had become too quiet. I backed out of the driveway, the tires leaving clean tracks in the fresh snow. I didn't glance at the house in the rearview mirror. Looking back was a luxury I couldn't afford. The past was a foreign country, and my visa had just expired. I drove. There was no destination programmed into a GPS, no map spread out on the seat beside me. There was only the road, stretching out ahead, a gray ribbon winding through a white landscape. I drove through the small towns of the Hudson Valley, past colonial farmhouses adorned with Christmas wreaths and clapboard churches with their doors thrown open. Life was going on. For everyone else, it was still Christmas, a day of peace and joy. For me, it was day one. The man I had been my entire life, Arthur Callahan, father, husband, craftsman, had died 5 days ago in the darkness of his own workshop. The man who had taken his place, the cold strategist who had just dismantled 2 lives with a single keystroke, was not someone I wanted to be. He was a tool, a necessary evil. And now that his work was done, I had to find out who was left. Was there anything left to build with? The rage was gone. The icy resolve had melted, leaving behind a profound and desolate sorrow. I had not just lost a son. I had been forced to execute him. I had amputated a part of my own soul to save the rest of me, and the phantom limb ached with an unbearable grief. Elena, what would she think of the man I had become? The thought was a sharp, physical pain in my chest. She, who had seen the good in everyone, who had believed in forgiveness and second chances. But then I remembered her fierce, quiet strength. Elena was gentle, but she was not weak. She had no tolerance for cruelty, and she despised deceit. She would have grieved for the son we had raised, but she would have understood the man I had to become to protect what was left of our life, of our integrity. You can't build on a rotten foundation, Art, she told me once, talking about a crooked client. You have to tear it all down and start again. That's what I was doing, tearing it all down. As the afternoon sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting the snowy fields in a warm, golden light, my phone, the burner I'd used for my team, buzzed in my jacket pocket. I pulled over to the shoulder of a deserted country road. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. The package has been delivered. The recipients are not pleased. The fallout is significant. Consider the debt paid. Be well, Art. MF. Maria Flores. I stared at the message for a long moment. She hadn't needed to tell me, but she did. It was a small act of human connection in the vast wilderness of my self-imposed exile. A reminder that I wasn't entirely alone. I typed back a simple reply. Thank you. Then I powered the phone down, removed the SIM card, snapped it in half, and tossed the pieces out into the snow. The last tie was cut. I kept driving west, chasing the last light of the day. I didn't know where I was going. Maybe Oregon, like I'd always talked about. The Pacific Coast, a small workshop overlooking the ocean, the smell of salt and cedar instead of pine and river water. Or maybe Arizona, where the dry heat would bake the damp chill out of my bones. It didn't matter. The destination wasn't a place on a map. It was a feeling, a chance to be just a man again. A man who worked with his hands, who found his peace in the honest language of wood, who built things that were strong and true. I had lost my son. I had given away my fortune. I had walked away from my home. But as the truck ate up the miles and the sun finally sank below the horizon, leaving the sky a brilliant, bleeding tapestry of orange and purple, I realized I had reclaimed something I hadn't even known I'd lost. Myself. My name was Arthur Callahan. I was a builder. And for the first time in a very long time, I was free. The road ahead was empty, the future unwritten. It was a blank piece of perfect, unblemished timber, and I had all the tools I needed to begin again.